My name is Nick Hutchinson, and this is my 10th year at DCW since I founded Glider Technology Limited. And quite remarkably, I have dodged this bullet to speak on 10 occasions consecutively. So here goes nothing. Great to see you all today. So 6 years ago, I was working with the Ministry of Defence as they prepared for the next generation of FM contracts across their operational estate. Those contracts came with a new operating model for the MOD. Up to that point, asset information had been held and maintained by their industry partners, aligned to MOD policies and standards, but managed on the supplier's systems. And under the new model, the information, the same information, would be owned by MOD. It would be maintained by the incoming supplier under contract, but exchanged routinely with the MOD back into their systems of record throughout the contract duration. That shift in operating model forced a significant data repatriation exercise. Information came out of the outgoing FM contractors' systems in their own format, not packaged neatly for MOD's new requirements, and 6 years later, that work continues. The MOD, to this day, is still aligning old legacy asset information into the new operating model, whilst 6 years of new information is being produced. Almost 80,000 individual documents exchanged back into the MOD systems each and every week. And that accumulation has grown to over 15 million documents over the last few years. And the work is far from finished. That is what the absence of the discipline that I'm here to introduce looks like in reality. At one of the largest operational estates in the country, and in less dramatic form, in every estate I've ever worked in. I'm Nick Hutchinson, I'm the founder of Glider Technology Limited, and today I'm introducing the discipline the built environment has been missing. That discipline is called asset intelligence. Spoiler alert, it's not AI. But it is what I recognize as the third pillar alongside two well-established standards, ISO 19650 and ISO 55001. But asset intelligence is the practicing discipline that turns what the standards describe into operational capability across the whole life cycle of a building. And that's, in particular, the existing operational estate, where the standards have set an ambition the industry has not yet delivered on. And that's the claim that I'm here to land. But before I unpack that, let me say what the new ISO 19650 draft gets right. Because the discipline I'm introducing builds upon the standards direction. It does not compete with it. The new draft is the most significant revision since the standard was first published, in my opinion. It merges the delivery and operations into a single life cycle process. It introduces pre-project organizational steps. And it moves the center of gravity from a project to the asset through whole life. And it commits to the whole life cycle ambition the industry has been gesturing at for over a decade now. And the consultation period closed only yesterday. So I'm going to talk about what the draft proposes, not treat it as already settled. But the drafting committee has done some serious work, and that should be commended. But standards alone cannot close the gap that I described earlier, and that's where asset intelligence starts. The dominant problem across the UK's operational estate is not the absence of standards. It is that the information needed to operate, maintain, and manage buildings sits in one of these four information states. And you probably all recognize them. Information that was structured during a construction project and then lost or degraded at handover when it really mattered. information that existed once, that has fragmented through years and years of uncoordinated change. And information that was never created in structured form at all. And a fourth one, information that is there. It is correct, it is whole, it is compliant, but no one inside the building can actually find it to use it. It's buried in the volume. So here are 4 ways the information fails the people who need it most. The first 3 are more about whether the information is sound. The 4th is about whether you can actually find it when it is. It is the failure behind what we call find in our definition. So just think about that for a minute. Imagine you're a doctor and your patient has been on your books for the last 30 years. You're responsible for their health. And you have no medical record, no allergies recorded, no medication history, no surgical notes, no consultant letters. Every single appointment with this patient, you make care decisions for them without any of that information. Unfortunately, in my experience, that's how many asset owners oversee the management of their estates in the UK today. This is the gap that asset intelligence is named for. Let me state the definition. Asset intelligence is the discipline that ensures the people responsible for buildings can find, trust, and act on the information they need to keep them safe, compliant, and performing. And now, for those who are familiar with the standards landscape, and forgive me if you're not, here's the structural claim. ISO 19650 is the information management standard for the built environment. It's rooted in BIM practice. It's domain specific. It's prescriptive about how information about buildings is produced and exchanged, largely through construction. The standard extends into operations, but it is less developed for the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th states, where the work is not delivering new information, but acquiring, recovering, reconstructing, or surfacing information from existing sources. ISO 55001 is an asset management standard, but it's generic across asset classes. It prescribes the management system that an organization must hold in place to manage its assets coherently. It tells the organization that the system needs to know what information it requires. It presumes someone is providing it. It doesn't specify how. The 2 standards meet on the question of asset information, but neither on its own delivers what the other presumes. Asset intelligence is the practice discipline that operationalizes both, specifically for the built environment, across the entire life cycle of the operational estate. It is the 3rd pillar. The discipline draws on both practitioner lineages, but it doesn't collapse into either. So from the asset management side, practitioners bring strategic asset, lifecycle cost, and risk-based decision-making competencies, as set out, indeed, by the Institute of Asset Management. From the information management side, practitioners bring structuring, exchange, and governance competencies developed through BIM-rooted practice. Asset intelligence holds both together at life cycle scale. 5 functions make up the discipline, holding 15 capabilities between them. I don't have time, unfortunately, to walk through all 15 today, but you should know that they are there. The discipline has more structural depth than the function names alone suggest. So we have requirements, deciding what information the organization needs, and specifying it for procurement and supply chains. And where the discipline goes beyond the new ISO 19650 is at the front end of recovering asset information for live operational estates. Iterative requirements determination. The scope of information and need is discovered progressively as the survey and discovery proceeds, not always defined up front. We then have the capture function, producing the information into a governed layer, either from capital projects, more certainly from the existing estate recovery, and from every operational change throughout the entire asset's life cycle. Then we have information governance, structuring, validating, securing, and holding someone accountable for that information. Then delivery, getting the information to the people and systems that depend on it, but in an accessible form they can actually act on. And last but certainly not least, use. Turning governed information into decisions and outcomes across 4 domains: environmental, social, safety, and economic. And there's 2 specific capabilities, if we hone in on one, that anchor the use function. They are decision support, putting governed information in front of the people actually making decisions in the form they can act on, and performance intelligence, measuring whether the information requirements set at the requirement stage are delivering the outcomes against the purposes they were designed for. And this is where asset intelligence goes furthest beyond the standards. The standards prescribe what information is needed, the discipline measures whether it works. And this is the intelligence in the name. There's 2 pathways into the asset intelligence discipline. One that we've called Create, which is for new build and major refurbishments, and Recover for existing operational estates. Different starting conditions, but not different disciplines. One architecture with convergence from information governance onwards. And a word for you who have spent your entire careers in BIM, digital engineering, and handover. I certainly have. It's Glider's most mature work today. Digital handover. Information delivered at construction's end in a form that operations can actually use. The discipline holds that work. It doesn't replace it, but it connects it to the rest of the life cycle. So it survives into operations rather than being lost there. And whichever pathway an organization enters through, the discipline is sustained. It's not one-off. Buildings change continuously. Fit-outs, equipment replacements, tenant works, maintenance interventions, compliance events. Each one creates new information that must enter the governed layer if the information is to remain trustworthy. So the discipline architecture names this operational update. And without it, even a successful handover or a completed recovery decays back into a recover problem within weeks. So the information layer is not built once. It is sustained through the life of the building, function by function and change by change. Now, some of you may be thinking that what I've just said sounds just like a new framework. And frameworks like this get proposed at conferences all the time. Speakers like me stand on stages like this one and announce new disciplines. But most of those announcements don't survive contact with the operational world. So why should you believe this one will? Because it isn't just a vendor framework. The Ministry of Defence has recognised that adherence to standards alone has not delivered the expected benefits it once promised. And it has committed to and will use the asset intelligence framework and discipline as one of 3 external strands feeding into its forthcoming information management mandate, alongside ISO 19650 and ISO 55001. The same 3-pillar architecture I've just set out. And the MOD's mandate carries a 4th element too, and that is MOD's own policies and standards, and there's hundreds, if not thousands of them. But the mandate makes the 3 external strands relevant to the defence estate. So this is not only a vendor claim. This is the UK's largest operator practicing the discipline and making it work for defence. The defence estate is over 31 million square metres of floor area, close to a 1/5 of the entire central government estate, on around 300,000 hectares of land, costing almost £4 billion a year to run, spanning literally thousands of buildings and infrastructure assets. serving the UK's military capability, a portfolio at a significant scale. So let me give you a sense of what the discipline looks like in operation at that scale. So the MOD's Recover Scope, that data repatriation program I described at the start, millions of unstructured documents and millions more data points, asset registers, structured information, progressively captured from their supply chains, capital delivery projects, and every individual change thereafter organised into a governed information layer. Recover is the discipline's language. That's physical survey, legacy document and data extraction, operational knowledge capture, reconciliation of conflicting sources. It's iterative by design. You recognise what is held and you evaluate against requirements and identify genuine gaps in your information layer. Then you sequence the work by value. The MOD's Create Scope sits alongside Recover. Every future capital project, every refurbishment, every supply chain capacity addition is brought into the discipline. Information requirements defined up front, information produced during design, governed during construction, and verified at commissioning, and handed over in a form immediately usable in operations. The same architecture, the same governance, applied at the start of every new asset's life instead of recovered decades later. So the MOD's work covers both pathways. Recover stabilises the existing estate, whilst Create prevents the same problem being recreated for the next generation of assets. And the discipline sustains the governed information layer through every operational change event in the building's life. So the point is the discipline is being practiced at scale across both pathways. And this is what asset intelligence looks like when an organisation commits. But the discipline needs more than just its functions and capabilities to actually be practiced. It needs the models that make it operable. And the discipline that we're going to give to industry gives you three. The maturity model, to see where you are. The adoption model, to plan your next move. And the value realization model, to prove the value. The standards describe what good looks like. The discipline makes it operable. So the maturity model that we've developed lets an organisation locate itself against a clear definition of what good looks like. Function by function, capability by capability. 5 levels across each of the 5 functions. The 5 levels are absent, through fragmented, structured, managed, to intelligent. It's a profile, not a score. Most organisations are uneven across the 5, and the unevenness is important. The function furthest behind is usually where the next investment unlocks the most value. The model also assesses 3 enablers that run across all 5 functions. Competency, governance authority, leadership commitment. These are the structural prerequisites that determine whether an organisation can actually progress between levels. The function profile shows what is missing. The enablers show why. The adoption model is the methodology for moving from one level to the next. It sequences the work. It names the preconditions that have to be in place at each step. And it identifies the failure modes that knock organisations off their path. It handles the practical question of what to do when the maturity profile is uneven. It isn't a roadmap, more a navigation system. And the value realization model connects the work to outcomes that your boards will recognize. 4 value mechanisms: risk reduction, cost avoidance, decision quality, and outcome achievement, tracked across 4 outcome domains: environmental, social, safety, and economic. And against the stakeholders, the value accrues to. Different time horizons, but different stakeholders. The asset owner, the FM contractor, the constructor, the supply chain, each have value to be derived from practicing this discipline. It's the model that lets the board see asset intelligence as an investment rather than an overhead. The thesis, the definition, and the architecture that we've developed sets out the discipline. These 3 models show you how to practice it. A quick word on where this sits in the wider landscape. The IM initiative from NEMA, the industry's ambition at sector level. Asset intelligence is the practicing discipline that turns that ambition into operational capability inside individual organisations. So the two operate at different levels, but they are complementary by design. And we certainly hope that the discipline contributes into that wider work, into the IM initiative's objectives, and into other initiatives that you've probably heard much about today. For example, the ADS Alliance on their work to harmonise asset data across the entire lifecycle. So the category is being openly built in alignment with the standards architecture and the institutions who hold it. So let me close where I started. The MOD's journey is not an outlier. The same gap exists in less dramatic form in every estate of meaningful scale in this country. The next time you walk into a building, ask yourself, who in that building can find, trust, and act on the information they hold about it? And for the majority of estates in this country, the answer is not many. The gap is the performance gap. Information lost at handover, fragmenting through years of change, information that was never created, or information that is there, but no one can actually find it. It's the gap that personal accountability under the Building Safety Act runs into. It's the gap that net zero commitments trip up on. It is the gap that estate leaders carry and that boards have not yet learned to ask about. And asset intelligence is the discipline that closes it. The category is named and the discipline is being practiced. The question for every operator in this room is no longer whether to start, it is where on the maturity profile you sit today, what you should do next, and the value that that will unlock. So, an invitation, not a pitch. The discipline is open. The thesis, the definition, the architecture, and the three models, maturity, adoption, and value realization. Glider created it, but in the coming weeks, we are giving it to industry as an open reference, free to read and build upon. The way in today is the Asset Intelligence Maturity Indicator on our website, glidertech.com. 5 minutes gives you a profile of where your organisation sits across those 5 functions, and the first move that matters most. So start there. And if you're hanging around today, please do come and see me and the team of experts on our stand at the Glider stand D650. One of us will walk you through where you sit today, function by function, and perhaps what you should do next, and the value it will unlock. Thank you. Hopefully there is no time for questions. I was kidding, we've got plenty of time. 5 minutes indeed. Matthew.
So thank you, Nick. Great presentation. Thank you. So as we talked about, we've been engaging a lot with FM operatives within the operational side of building use. And we're finding a lot of the IM principles coming through from delivery are just lost because you don't get adoption by the ground level individuals. So have you got any examples of case studies of people adopting this at ground level and changing the culture? So Frank, the FM, 60-year-old guy, actually buys in?
Absolutely, yeah. And the adoption plan, the adoption model talks about that. What are the practical enablers that you need at organisational level to make this a reality? To make the ambition that the standards set grounded in the day-to-day operations or construction activities across an estate. We spent a huge amount of time and effort talking directly to those operatives, to those users of the information that actually this depends upon. Not the people generally that create it in the first place. And that's one of the misaligned incentives in our industry that we face. Construction teams are producing information that they'll probably never use because they disappear when construction completes. FM operators aren't generally engaged and included through the design and construction phase. So that disconnect, the discipline handles, and many more. Any further questions? Any further questions? Fantastic. We'll wrap up there. Thanks ever so much for listening to me, and I hope to hear from you soon. Take care.